Warning, this video is pure crackpot fanon. We really tried to keep it as sane and as possible as we could, but the entirety of our initial recording was recorded around 12 to 1 in the morning and cuts out about halfway through. This is made almost entirely for entertainment and shitpost purposes. Oh, also spoilers everywhere. In Deltarune Chapter 4, there is a moment that absolutely changed my life. Susie runs ahead of us to the prophecy chamber room thingy and destroys a pane showing what we assume to be Rowley dying. All those details, though, are a bit moot in our case.
All that caught our attention was that sweet ketchup dripping down her face. A monster? Bleeding? But this is insane!
I'm absolutely losing my fucking marbles. Mostly because of the evidence to the contrary in the same chapter.
Before entering the church in Chapter 4, you can make your way to the library. There you find out you're locked out because you're a sick We can find the books upstairs that can be read in the previous chapters that say, quote, "When monsters die, their dust will be spread over what they love." This book was not available in the previous chapters.
You may be thinking that that was put in there to explain Girdle, and you're right.
But what if we told you
That this book is the confirmation that we needed to dig deeper. So, running with the knowledge that Susie bleeds, where else can we point to in the series for this? Once again, if you're a sick monster, you know Sans is our only other bleeder in these games. Say, Angel, why does Sans bleed?
Before we jump headfirst into insanity, let's set a few more ground rules. Susie is a character that is repeatedly said to be determined, even outright by our boy Gersi.
Right. And just like Girdle and Susie, Sans and Alphys work together.
What?
One last thing. Susie with a Z is confirmed to exist in Undertale via a Gaster follower. Now with all that out of the way, you're gonna have to hold our hands tight for this one.
Really clench those hands.
We are aware that Gaster was the previous royal scientist to Alphys in Undertale. We also know he fell into his own creation, what we assume means into the core, most likely leading him to Undertale and or Deltarune's game code.
We also know that humans have been falling down there for a while, possibly around the same time Gaster was the scientist. With all the monster kind sealed by that barrier, Gaster had to have been trying to open it.
The evidence for this is the determination extractor itself, being created to attempt to use monster souls to destroy the barrier. Now at this point, amalgams don't exist, not to mention anything involving Gaster's past is completely up in the air.
And that's where we come in.
What if, and this is where the pot cracks, Gaster took Susie with a Z soul using the DT extractor and placed it in one of the previous children. Now that leaves purely one question and no others on the table. Wait, what was the question?
Why, Susie?
Before we jump into that, let's talk about multiverses.
Undertale and Deltarune clearly have similarities between them. It's hidden character Easter eggs all over the game. They're extremely hard to catch.
Totally unrelated. The same space anomaly is a rule in science fiction where two versions of the same person are not allowed to exist in the same space. A good example of this would be Gaster. Gaster, after falling into the core, has ceased to exist across both games, showing that the core may lead to a sort of pocket or space between the universes, or in other words, the game's code. Just slot that away for a bit.
So why Susie? Following the rules of Undertale and Deltarune put in their place for their universes, parallel characters seem to follow very closely to the personalities and actions of their counterparts. For example, Undyne, Toriel, and Alphys. So following this rule, we can assume Susie Undertale had to be pretty similar to Susie Deltarune. Brash, brave, bold, badass,
and most importantly, determined.
A character with a lot of determination in Undertale? Sounds like the answer to their problems.
It is! And Gaster knows it. That's right, baby. We're basically writing fanfiction.
Gaster would almost certainly have the same tasks as Alphys, meaning he was tasked to discover a way to open the barrier. Susie, just like Susie, was always an outcast that wanted to be seen as a hero, someone people can look up to and be proud of. So it would be both to Gaster's and Susie's benefit to attempt to extract her soul and her determination to try and open the barrier. With monsters not being able to withstand so much determination, Susie may have been amalgamated with the corpse of one of the previous children. Now multiplying her already large amount of determination, this allowed a monster to withstand a human's amount of determination.
Absolute crackpot, but if you're here, I know you're eating it up.
Gaster's lab was incomplete during his time as the scientist, and this caused major complications with the amalgam process.
What resulted from the experiment is a lifeless monster corpse, refusing to dust. The experiment and everything there was left behind after Gaster fell into the core, disappearing completely, along with the knowledge of Susie. Now with Alphys as the royal scientist and Sans as her assistant, the monster body that refused to dust was quickly discovered by the two, and was disposed of in the core, not wanting to risk anything.
Now that all sounds pretty fucking insane, and doesn't even seem to relate to Deltarune at all, right? Well, not exactly. That's because our boy WD Gaster is the only character that exists in both games not existing at all, hiding himself in the game's folds and nooks.
And that boy got there via the core. So if the core acts as some entryway into the back end of the games, why wouldn't Susie being thrown into the core result in the same fate? Confirmation.
No, you idiot! And that is because of her determination. Regardless of how Gaster or Susie ended up in the core, we know for a fact that Susie has a strong will and determination.
And knowing Susie, she's the kind of dude to jump into raw energy and have the belief she'll make it out the other end. All that determination allowed Susie, with her corporeal body and monster soul, to make it across the game.
Maybe Gaster was even trying the same. Running with our theory, the experiment could have been considered a failure, and Gaster took a shot at the only other way out of the underground. But without the body of a human and the soul of a monster that can withstand the determination, he got stuck in the in-between, erasing himself across both universes.
Now, is there any evidence for what we're yapping about? Probably enough for fandom, which is enough for me. How do we know that Susie isn't Undertale at all again? We learned it via a Gaster follower added into Undertale's Switch port just a few years ago. Now, I'm not here to unravel the followers too much, but from what we know, they seem to be echoes of memories that can't exist anymore, assumedly because of the core.
We learn almost everything we know about Gaster from the followers, including his fate leading him to the core. Susie having a Gaster follower makes nearly no sense at all, unless they have something related between them. This, coupled with the followers saying the time we meet her is fast approaching, before literally fading away, suggests some connection between both universes, Gaster and Susie.
With our best bet for Gaster's fate being slipping through the games through the core, it would make sense for Susie to at least fall in as well, granting her her own Gaster follower and erasing her from Undertale.
But wait, Susie has a family in Deltarune. We even see her room. And if all this is true, why the hell isn't this relevant in Deltarune?
Thank you for throwing easy questions to make us sound smarter. Susie's family existing doesn't hurt the theory at all, and this goes back to the same space anomaly, where two versions of the same person can't be in the same place. In JoJo, people turn into puzzles and blow each other up if that happened.
But for here, this isn't the case. Another answer to the anomaly is one version of a character taking the place of another. Say Susie replacing Susie. Now we could just say that's how it works and call it a day. But don't forget that Gaster doesn't exist in either after fragmenting, which in our opinion suggests that this is how the anomaly works in these universes.
But why doesn't Susie talk about this? Because she doesn't remember it. Clearly falling into the core affects the world and maybe worlds around you. All of Undertale completely forgot Gaster, including Gaster himself it feels. So entering the core causes some sort of erasure of memory or amnesia. If Susie made it through Undertale into Deltarune following the rules of Gaster disappearing from everything, Susie's memories of a past life seem pretty easy to get lost in translation.
A theory I've seen talks about how Susie was never the monster in the prophecy in the first place, and ended up replacing Noelle. The biggest pieces of evidence is the prophecy told in chapter 4, showing somebody who doesn't even look like Susie. They don't even have the same weapon. Not to mention, Susie can't wear the ribbon or use a sword. Traits the monster in the prophecy, and suspiciously are things Noelle can do and modded into the party in the new chapters.
One last piece of evidence is Chris himself. At the start of Deltarune, what everyone assumes is Gaster helps the player create a human vessel for them to enter. That is literally what Gaster attempted to do with Susie, but this time didn't use a monster or a human soul, but our soul? That point isn't too important, more so than Gaster is basically confirmed to place a soul into a human body, which makes Susie just a bit less far-fetched.
Since Gaster's so relevant, what about Entry 17? That's clearly talking about Dark World.
That very well may be why Gaster fell into the core. Maybe he knew he would fragment across existence, but with that new form of being, allowed himself to create the perfect vessel for the roaring. Chris! This makes Susie not being a part of the prophecy a lot more personal as well, with Susie being a nearly failed version of Chris essentially. I love fan and theory crafting.
That's already half of what people see as canon anyway.
Exactly! So does our theory make sense? Narratively, I guess, but in any other sense, I think that's up for you to decide.
This was a refined theory too. We had a lot more crackpots lying around.
Yeah, like the photo in Sans shed being him, Susie, and Gaster, or Alphys being the one to make her Susie human hybrid.
Or that Susie's the knight.
We both know using a child's corpse might be a bit of jumping the shark, but for our theory to work, we either had to accept that a human body was a vessel for a monster's soul, or a monster's soul alone could house enough determination to survive the core.
Which sounded like Undertale blasphemy to us. If there's two facts that we know, it's that monsters can't handle that much determination, and at the least, monsters in Undertale don't bleed.
So did we solve Deltarune? I don't know. We did have something in our mind where this was all related to the roaring and that Susie was sent to stop it or something along those lines, but that involved Sans and Alphys a lot more and just led to more fanfiction, which, believe it or not, I really tried to not do.